Welcome back to the Bechele software videos. In this video we will see an overview of the operating elements in trackui.pl. If you start trackui.pl without parameters, it will come back and tell you that you need to provide a path directory that contains at least one or more MP3 files. So let's do that. And you will see it comes back telling you what you need to provide. So it needs an MP3 directory. So for example, we have an MP3 in here, in home Bechele 3, and if I type in this, it will take a moment for initialization and it will come back with the new interface. So you see, if you know the previous version, you have some more elements. Typically it's more or less the same function. So the window elements look a little bit different, they're in a different position. So what you can see here, because we can serve up to an unlimited number of servos, the number of servos would not fit onto the screen. For example, here for this setup, we can see only 24 in one setup. So therefore we have different, as we call, notebooks inside here, and then subsequent servos are inside here, S1 and S2, and the same thing applies to the Y joystick. But you see, when I click here, nothing will happen. The reason is there's a small bug in the curses UE library of Perl, so I cannot do anything about that. But it's not a big issue. If you read down here, it's page up, page down to change the servo page. So if I go for page down, I get to the second page, another page down, go back, and so I'll press this on the keyboard, page up, page down, so I get to the correct settings. So I can do it here with a mouse. Also can use page up, page down. So here you see the number of servers you have. In this case, 64 are configured. In fact, we only use 23 for the moment, or 24 actually, because servo 0 is counted as 1, is the first servo. So therefore we have 24 servos, including 0. So that's the major thing that has changed with the new Bechele software. But you can see also up here you have some more possibilities inside. So typically it's like before. Here you can select the file that is going to be taught. That means where you set the servos for. And if you go for next, so it loads the next file, but for now we have only one file inside there, inside the directory. And this is the choke MP3, and therefore if a choke servo is already there, it will be loaded also. Therefore you see this here. And in the next one is also something like you will know already before. It's a start and move is on 0, stop and move at 360. So we can say this servo file has 360 moves, so it's quite short. And if you count these 20 moves per second, 360 by 20, so we're about 18 seconds. So the next one is the same thing like before. Update maximum move field at the end of the MP3. That's a little bit different than before. What it does is if you click it, then it will, and you run, for example, a record, then it will count how many ticks or how many times you need to end the MP3. So this means the number of movements will be recalculated. Normally this is not necessary. This is automatically ticked if you, for example, have a brand new file. If you have only the MP3, then this is already active, and if you leave it and you make a record and you wait until the end, it will update automatically the maximum moves. Here you cannot change. Okay, and the stop and move is something you can change. We come later to it why you should do this, perhaps. The next is the copy servos. This is a brand new thing. What you can do here is copying one existing servo movement, or just a part of it, into a different servo. For example, if you already taught one servo and you want to have a copy somewhere else for a different servo, the complete movement file or the complete movement sequence, then of course you can do this. And you can even copy a range. So let's explain. This is a little bit complicated, to be honest, but believe me, this is a very helpful thing when you want to do some quick edits, or you want to do some quick copy, or you want to extend your teachings. So what it does, it copies from server. Let's say we have already made some teaching for the right eye and the left eye, for example, for left and right, and we want to copy this, for example, to the second one. So we have two connected here, and you can see down there is another eye right, eye left. So theoretically I could say, okay, I want to copy from servo 0 to 1. So 0 and 1 shall be copied. Okay, or I can even have a bigger range. I can say I copy the complete range from 0 to 23. 23. So all of these servos will be copied, and they go to, now I have to define another servo. I can use it for 24, but I also even can copy it back to the same position, so go to 0 again. Now the question is why doing this? It may be stupid. I mean, for a normal copy, if you copy the source to the destination and it's the same destination like the source, there is no effect. But what you can do is you can do something like, for example, invert. Invert does more or less, if you it changes the direction of your servo movement. That means if you before did, let's say, open the eyelids, and then you want to close the eyelids, if you want to change it, you can do an invert, and all of the servos involved will be inverted. That's sometimes very helpful to do some changes. For example, let's think about that. You have an eye, and you want, if one eyelid is closing, the other one shall open. Then you can do this by copying and inverting it, and then it will help you to achieve this very quickly without doing a new teaching, especially for this part. And you can use a certain range only. For example, if you start from 0 to 360, this will be respected. So this copy is respecting the start move to stop move. So if, for example, say I want to start at move 100 and I end up in, let's say, 156, and then I do a copy, then only this range will be changed and inverted. All the other things remain as they are. So this means I would now, for all servos, for 0 to 23, change from start move 100 to 156. I invert them. This means the direction of the movement is just inverted. It doesn't make too much sense for this one now, therefore I don't do it. This is possible. That's a copy possibility. The next one is also a little bit difficult to understand. Perhaps it's rotate moves. Because what you can do is shifting. Because always think about when you start moving, or when you run a sequence later on, it always starts at move 0 and goes to the last move. And the last move is depending on the length of your MP3. And this is, by the way, the maximum move is 360. So if we say 360, 360, this is the typical range you want to copy or you want to do something. But if you want to use a different range, because you, for example, only want to record some only in some other areas, then you can, of course, you can change it. Start at move 0, so this means from the beginning of your sequence till the end of your sequence within your file. So the complete time of the MP3. Let's say this one, and now, for example, if we copy from 0 to 23 to servo, let's say 24. So what would now happen if I do it this way? First of all, let me remove the inversion. So this means it would copy all the contents from servo 0 to servo 23 to 24. Yeah, well, but they don't fit inside. Not a problem, because number 1, servo number 1 becomes 25 to 26 and so on. So this means everything you have in your servos. The next one is shifting. What can do shifting? Shifting is for moving internally inside one servo. You can change the positions. Let's say if you have the first movement here on 0 and the last movement is on 360, then you can say, okay, I want to shift, for example, for 100. What does happen is what has been on 0 is going to move 100, and 100 is going to 200, 200 to 300, and 360 then in this case will go to 99, because if we move for shift plus for 100, we move in a positive direction, becomes then 99. It rotates, means that what exceeds the maximum goes to the front. So that helps you not to lose any of the moves. But you cannot just do it in a positive direction. Every time where you would now press copy, it does a copy and it would shift the content for 100. In addition, you can also do a minus 100. So what it does move it in the negative direction. This means that you shift it negatively. This means what has been 100 before becomes 0, and what has been 200 becomes 100, and so on. So you can shift in positive or negative direction. So what copy does. It's quite a lot of things you can do with it, because you can use this one as negative and positive, the shifts, and you can also say move from 360 to 0, and take here 0, so you have a negative direction. Started move 360 and 0, and then what it really does, it's inverting the direction at that point inside the file. This means if I do something like this, what has been on 360 goes to 0, and what has been on 0 goes to 360, and so on. So that means it's just turning around the complete movements. And negative in the shift directions. There are a lot of things, there's the different combinations possible. Together with invert, there are a lot of possibilities to move things and you reuse them for other purpose. Just a possibility. You don't need to use it, but it's sometimes very helpful. But typically you start here on 0 and you end here at 360 in this case, because that's the maximum here. That might be on a different file, it looks different. Okay, so that's just because we have this number of seconds, and then of course it ends up in this number of steps. So that's with copy. Typically you don't need to provide a till number. If you copy from 0 to 24, then you copy only the first one. You're not forced to provide a till. Till is only interesting if you want to copy a range. So in this case we would only copy only one single servo into a different one. The rotation is normally always on. You can remove it. If you remove the rotation, not much will happen. The only thing, it will complain if the range is exceeded. For example, if you say the complete range from, let me see, you want to rotate the moves, let's say we go for 100 and shift it, and you use the full range, and then if you do a copy, now it will come up with an error message. Yeah, because the shifting exceeds move 0 or maximum number of moves. Okay, so here down, by the way, is the status window, and it will tell you what's wrong. So if, of course, it's because we want to shift 360 by 100, but we cannot, because we do not rotate. We do not copy it to 0 at that point, and then it will end up in a problem. So that only works if I, for example, say only from 0 to, let's say, 150, I do the range, and then if I add another 100, we end up at 250, so that's within the range. If I now do a copy, it will do the copy. Now it tells me servo 0 till 0 copied into servo 24 from move 0 to 150. It tells you what it really did. Next one is the process section. In the process section, like before, you can start a record, you can start a view, and you have something new. It's fill. Up to now, the only possibility to do a teaching of some new movement was using the joystick, move it in the direction you assigned it to, and then you have it inside. But there is a new possibility. It's a kind of filling by vector. This view all servos is something different. Then you see all the servos during recording. But the point is, if you have 64 servos and all the servos value end up in a recording window, then of course you see a lot of information. So for example, view all servos. If I now go for view, for example, and then I do some test, Yeah, you see there are lots of different information, so that's probably not what you want. So therefore you have the possibility to say, okay, I don't want to view all the servos, then you view only the ones which are checked. For example, if I want to look for I right and I left for the left right, and I want to see the values for that one, and I click onto view and I do the same thing, I see only these two. Okay, you see. The next one is fill. The fill is quite a nice thing because it's always depending on the one you check here. So you can say fill move. Let's say we have a range from 0 to 360. From 0 to move 360. And let's say I don't want to do it here because I don't want to mess my setup. I put it on server 24 because 24 is not there. I can say from move, I can type in, for example, let's say a value 0 to, let's say, 4096. So what it really does, you will see easily. If I now go to fill, because now I said selected servos filled with vector from move 0 to move 360 with a value of 0 to 4096. So if I now look at this servo view, you will see the servo 24 is starting with 0, and at the end of the last one, 360, it will end up in 4096, and it's increasing step by step. So that's a vector I can put in. Have a look. So you see it's starting. You see these values here. Okay, so it's 4096, and if I go up here, I don't know if my buffer is big enough. Yes, it's starting on 0 and it ends up in 4096. So it's recalculating all these steps in between with the right distance. So okay, it's just a vector in this direction. So that's something you can do, for example, if you want to move, say, a slow movement, very steady, slow movement, which is sometimes difficult to do it with a joystick. If you want to move from the start, from the first step till the end, slowly. So how do you know how slow or how quick you need to move? So that's something difficult. So therefore you have the possibility in such cases to fill it using a vector. But you don't need to use 0 to 360. You can also start at 40 to, let's say, 120 only, right? And then you start with a value of 50 or 500 to 2000. Okay, and then if you do so for 24, if you now click onto fill, it's a bit tricky. Let me see if this is coming up better. Yeah, it's, I think the problem is it's not scrolling enough, so I cannot see it. So I need to make the window a little bit larger. I think that was the problem. So anyway, it's a bit tricky with the smaller windows because you need a lot of space. But if you have a bigger screen, you make your window simply a little bit bigger, and then it's adapting automatically. So in this case, just have a look, Control Q. So I'll make the maximum here, and then just start the program again. It's not using the complete screen. That's also something you can change, of course. You can change the size in the settings file. You can define that. How many servos to see in one row. In this case, if for a smaller screen, it's only 24. But it can be, you can say, you can define it for 40, then it goes down till here, and then you have much more space. So let me show this, Control Q. So if I go to modules, and if I go for VI config L, and then we have, where is that? Number a servo of rows. Let's say we have 45. Okay, number of servers per row. And if you do so, okay, then I go into trackui again, and you see if we're using then 45. See, it's much bigger than. Okay, but it has a disadvantage, of course, because if your screen is too small, let me show you what happens. If you make your screen smaller than this, it will come up with a message: your screen is currently too small for this application. Resize the screen and restart the application. So in this case, there is not much you can do. Instead of making it bigger, then of course it will work. But this is something, yeah, it's now a little bit messed up. So what you can do is Control Q, go back, and start it again. And then it fills up the screen. Now that's also a function of Cursors UE, so there is nothing I can do about that. So that's given by the application. The big advantage for using Cursors UE, you can use the whole thing from remote over a terminal screen. So you do not need to have a screen connected to the Raspberry. That's a big advantage, and that's the reason why I used Cursors UE instead of some other interface. So that makes it much easier. And it's also not taking too much resources, because these GUIs take a lot of resources from the computer, and we better use the resources for our movements and for our application. And anyway, the way of working is more or less the same. At least that's the way how I did it. So far, exit with Control Q, that's the information, and page down and page up to change the page. And of course, it's automatically, you remember before we had 3 different tabs on notebooks, now we have only 2. So if I go here, so 63 is on the second one. And if you have defined, let's say, only 20 servos, it goes only down here. So it is up to you how many servers you want to define. Apart from that, all the rest is more or less like we had it before already in the previous application.